This episode is brought to you by AudioQuest. With products to fill every need and prices to suit every budget, AudioQuest is made for you. Visit AudioQuest.com for more information.
So, Srajan, we're back for another round of news items, right, in the hi-fi world, where we ostensibly go a little bit deeper than the press release. And in fact, in one of my items, I want to call into question the quality of the press release that I received. But that's not my first item, and I'm hoping you'll let me go first. Is that cool?
Please.
This is an item that I didn't cover on my website, and I bloody well should have done, but it was just a hell of a week. Now, I'll start with a question to you, Srajan, because I don't know whether you know who this is. But do you know the name Devon Turnbull?
Yes. But I only know it from some stereophile articles. And I believe that Michael Lavonia might have also talked him up.
Yes. So I don't know much about the guy. I mean, I know he's a big noise in the USA more than he is in Europe. He used to work in fashion, but now he's turned his sort of long-standing enthusiasm for hi-fi into a new business. And I think it's important to, I guess, underline that he hasn't just cut over from fashion to hi-fi on a whim. Like, he's been doing this for many years behind the scenes. And what he does, he kind of makes speaker kits, high efficiency speaker kits, sells those on his website. They're extremely popular. I think he runs kind of like workshops where people build them. I think he does the same for low powered tube amps as well. But I think most people know him as somebody who exhibits. Is your cat there?
No.
Okay.
But I have a feeling I know where you're going.
Right.
Because didn't he, or hasn't he, sort of co-authored a collab with the Denon cartridge? Isn't there like a Turnbull version?
Yes, there is. There's a Turnbull version of the 103. Mm-hmm. So I think it's called the 103.0. But it's internally, it's the same as the 103 or the 103R. I can never remember which one. I always get confused by those two. But it's just got a clear plastic shell. So I guess in many ways that's, you could be cynical and call it a branding exercise.
Right.
But he is working with these kinds of companies, very much a vinyl guy, but he has run sort of exhibition spaces at various galleries in New York and San Francisco, where he sets up a high efficiency speaker system fronted by tube amps, turntable, and then just creates a listening space for people to come and enjoy. These are queues around the block, which Lavonia has written about these several times.
Yeah, it's sort of like an American version of a kisser bar in Japan, except temporary, right?
Exactly that, yeah. But the thing is, right, like, two things I would say about him. He is hi-fi young. He's 44, I think. I hope I've got that right and I haven't upset the guy. But he is more well-known as a hi-fi sort of... promoter, ambassador, that's the right word, than anybody I can think of. So it's funny because I had a friend who I hadn't seen for years. We had dinner in Berlin about, I don't know, maybe a year ago. And he lives in New York now. And he was telling me, I got some speakers from a guy called Devon Turnbull. I'm like, you got those? Oh, that's pretty cool. So like he could have picked anything from any hi-fi store, but he went for Devon Turnbull speakers. So the guy has presence. He's got a store in... I don't know whether it's in Manhattan or Brooklyn. I'll come back to that later because I want to mention that in a moment. But the meat of this story is basically he's now collaborated with Klipsch on a new speaker called the KO-R1. And I think it's kind of like a rebuild, sort of, very loosely, of the Heresy 4, which I've just reviewed, because that's a three-way that sort of sits very low on the floor and is canted back. And this is not a three-way, it's a two-way. It doesn't sit on the floor. It does come with its own custom stands when you buy them. Okay. But what Turnbull has done is, he's turned it into a two-way. He's using two Klipsch drivers. The first one is the woofer from the Heresy 4. Okay. I checked the model numbers because you can see them on Devon Turnbull's website. It's called OJAS, O-J-A-S, and you can see it on Klipsch's website. But then instead of having a mid-range horn and a treble horn built into the cabinet, he's mounted a tweeter inside a metal horn enclosure on the top of the cabinet. So I think it's a look. I think it looks fantastic. But I know a lot of grumpy people will be like, "Well, that's not for me." So But it's just it's a thing that I think either you love it or hate it. It's going to divide a room. But
now you said he did and he did.
Yeah.
So does he make the decisions on the parts and Klipsch is just building it, or is it more of a collaboration between him and their engineering department? Do you know how that breaks out?
I don't, but I know that Turnbull does have some engineering skills. So it's not like he kind of go, well, Klipsch, make me a speaker and I'll put my name on it. It's absolutely not that.
Okay.
So I think he worked with Roy Delgado on doing the crossover and also tuning the port, because the port's on the front and not on the back as it is on the Heresy 4. So I don't think it goes as low as the Heresy 4. I do have a number for this somewhere. Where's the bass response? It goes down to 51 hertz, minus 3 dB.
Okay.
So it's okay, but the thing is about the Heresy 4, because it's got a 12, they both got 12-inch bass drivers, right? So I think that 12-incher in the Heresy 4 is a bit too bulbous for my room. A little bit too much. Like, it's a bit too thick at about 100 hertz, mid-bassy, right? Mm-hmm. And I think this might be a better fit. I like the look way more as well. So, he's got a birch ply cabinet. It's an 8-ohm speaker. It's 98 dB sensitive. So we know that the advantages of high sensitive speakers are that they tend to have, in the main, generally very good dynamics and are very good at low listening levels. The two things I would think, right? Am I right about that? I think so.
Do I see a review coming on or a possible purchase?
Well, the thing is, right, so when these were announced, the details were so sketchy on availability, because initially Klipsch said it's going to be 100 pairs and that's it, and you can get them from OJAS's or Devon Turnbull's online store. So I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I've got to buy them there and then have them imported and pay shipping fees and then import fees to the German customs, which is never fun. So I thought, oh, that's going to be a pain, and then it was going to be limited to 100 pairs. So I thought, by the time I get my shit together, they will all have gone. But everything I've seen since in terms of coverage online about these speakers says, oh, Klipsch are being really coy about the numbers they're making. So they're obviously going to make more than 100. Oh, I would hope so anyway. And then there's talk of them coming to Europe, this model coming to Europe in the spring of next year. So it is available, I think, in selected Klipsch dealers in the USA, and I expect it to be available here next year. I might take a punt and buy a pair. I don't know. But the other thing about it is that I've got a video coming that Jana has shot, an interview with Devon Turnbull in his New York, let's call it a New York store / exhibition space, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that's going to cover a lot of bases in terms of what it is, who he is, what he does, what he's all about, because a lot of people won't know who he is. And yeah, so I'm very interested in this because, as you know, like you, I like high efficiency speakers, and I like the dynamics more than I like sort of a smooth frequency response. For me, just having something a bit funky, I don't care. But if it doesn't have any dynamics, I'm not really that interested. I don't care how flat it is. So I just think this is a very interesting development, and maybe it came about. I'm guessing here. I'm projecting. Maybe it's because Klipsch, being a very sort of old-timey American company, needs a shot in the arm in terms of a way to reach the young folk, the kids. And I'm not saying that kids will necessarily afford these, because they sell for $8,500 a pair, which is quite a bit more than the Heresy 4. But I think, I don't know, you'd have to listen to them to see if they're for you. I mean, I don't know. I do this for a living, so I can afford to take a punt and have a pretty good guess that I'm going to like them, because I've heard lots of other Klipsch speakers. In fact, I've got a pair of Forte 4 right behind. Oh, you can see them over my shoulder, right behind me here, and a pair of Zousol 6. It makes it sound like I live in a hi-fi cave. I kind of do, really. Just I've got two of them.
Yeah. But I have actually never reviewed or heard a Klipsch in my own house ever.
Right. Okay.
I'm a complete Klipsch version.
Yeah, I mean,
and I guess the thing that prevents me from really going for it is primarily the look. I know a lot of people like the old-timey sort of broad-shouldered furniture type refrigerator on footers look, but that's not that's not me.
It's very uncharitable of you, Srajan. It does look like a bar fridge, isn't it? With a, yeah. I mean, I do like it. I kind of, maybe that's it. I mean, for me, what makes me want to buy a pair of these, let me get the model name again, KOR1, is the looks, and it's that horn on top,
right?
Because it makes them look like no other speaker.
Is
and
it
I'm sure
angled?
they'll have.
Is the horn like sort of angled down?
I'm not sure, but I think there is some user adjustability on its position. I don't know whether you can slide it backwards and forwards or tilt it up or down, or maybe. Oh no, hang on. There is there's a dial next to the binding post where you can adjust the amount of treble going in.
Okay.
So you can attenuate the top end a little bit, because a lot of people kind of complain that Klipsch speakers can be a bit sort of aggressive in the top, or they certainly used to be. I mean, this is the problem with Klipsch. They've been around for so long. A lot of people cemented their opinions about Klipsch 20 years ago, and they've changed. You know, the sound is sort of mellowed a little bit, I think. So, go figure. Anyway, that's my first item. Over to you.
I'm going to give you 4 letters.
Okay.
And I'm going to ask you how to pronounce them. Because I think I have 7 different ways that I can think of. And I don't know which one is the correct one.
Right.
Okay, so the letters are A, U, N, E.
Oh goodness me! Is this a Chinese brand? Mm-hmm. So I would say Aune, but it could be Aune, it could be Aune, it could be, I don't know, Aune. I don't know. I don't know how. The Chinese have got to sort this out. They've got to think. They've got to speak to somebody in the West and go like, "Is this name difficult for you guys to say?" I don't know.
Well, my contact at the factory is Candy.
Okay.
And I asked Candy, I said, I have no idea how to pronounce your name. How do you pronounce it?
Yeah.
And she basically wrote back saying you can pronounce it A-U-N-E if you like. And then then I said, well, I think this is how you pronounce it. And then I gave her the phonetic version, which was either on, or oni, or oni, or ayun, or ayune, or ayuni, or aune, and we didn't get anywhere. Maybe it was.
God bless you, Srajan, for trying.
Maybe it was expecting too much to ask a Chinese speaker to somehow convert a name to phonetic English in a way that made sense to me. If we were on the telephone, I would pick it up in a second.
Yeah.
But using it via email, I didn't get anywhere. So I'm going to decide to call it Ayun, because I just like the way it sounds.
Okay.
So Ayun is a Chinese brand, and they have been around since 2004, so 20 years. Okay, another riddle thrown at you, another 4 letters. M-E-T-A.
Meta.
What does that suggest in your mind when I say meta?
That's the materials that Klipsch, that Kef are making a big noise about, that they put behind the tweeters and their speakers at the moment. But it's also like something connected to something else, right? Like metadata. You know, so it's data about data. So it's I guess you call it subject adjacent, maybe.
Okay, so if we stay in hi-fi and we stay with your connection, which is a meta material which Kef is using, why are they using it, and what is it doing in Kef's instance?
So it's to absorb the back wave of the tweeter, so it doesn't bounce forward again and distort the front wave of the tweeter.
And how is it doing it, and what does it look like?
Well, as far as I know, it looks like a disc with like a maze pattern on it. I mean, I've got a colleague in Australia who I've seen give quite a hard time to Kef about this on a Zoom call, saying, well, like, it's just a disc. Why do you call it a meta material? How is it a new material? But the maze is tuned in a way that it absorbs a range of frequencies that the tweeter would emit. This is my best understanding of it.
Mine as well. And so now we're going to combine Ayun and meta, and we're going to arrive at dragon scales.
Of course we are.
Of course we are. So now envision a bagel, okay? With an asymmetrical hole in the middle. So the hole is not exactly in the middle, it's sort of off-center.
Okay.
Now take a very, very thin lateral slice, just maybe like a millimeter thick. So now we have the shape. It's round on the outside, the hole is not exactly in the center, and it's very, very thin. Okay. Now on top of that sliver, now you're going to grow very small hexagonal pillars that are maybe 10 to 15 millimeters tall. So you've got lots of little pillars facing up that are separated by a very, very small gap between each pillar. And all the pillars are leaning in the same direction. I can't tell what they're made out of. They might be 3D printed. They could be rubber. They could be some other material. But that's the metamaterial that, because of what it looks like, Aune called dragon scales. And they put this into this pair of headphones.
Holding up a headphone in front of the camera, so yeah, okay.
So this is the Aune SR7000, which is a sealed headphone. On the inside, we can see that the pad opening is oval, and that one side of the pad is a lot wider than the other, and that the driver sits at a quite extreme angle to face directly at the ear. What we can't see is that behind and around that driver, we have this metamaterial. That sits behind there, and then it goes all the way around.
So, just to cover myself here, Srajan, legally, I want to point out that KEFs, I think their terminology, metamaterial, or whatever they're using, they do have it trademarked. So I don't want to suggest for a moment that Aune are using the same tech, and I'll let their legal departments work that out. But like, I'm not going to be in the middle of this by going, okay, here's a headphone that uses something similar. But I understand, is the concept the same? Is to absorb the back wave of the headphone driver?
Correct. And because this is a 50 millimeter dynamic driver, which is a very standard size, and this one driver covers the whole frequency range, unlike the KEF, this is not just an absorber for a tweeter. This is an absorber that works across the entire frequency band. And why is that important? With a sealed headphone? It's because otherwise we are creating lots of room modes. What in a room would be resonances. We would have the rear wave of the driver interact directly with the back wall and with the side walls, and all that energy would eventually try to come back out through the diaphragm, delayed in time and rotated in phase, which would sort of give us a stuffy sound, and it might also give us a sort of bloated, ringy bass that doesn't sort of stop on time. So this is the SR7000 at 639 euros. And Aune also have this one, which is called the AR5000, which is the open back version. And peculiarly enough, the open back version is 329. The sealed one is 639.
Does the open back version have the back wave absorber, the dragon tails?
It doesn't need it.
Doesn't need it, right. Okay, so that might be why. Maybe why it's the price differential?
Possible. Now, I'm going to show something that we're then going to have to translate for the people who are not watching.
Okay.
But if we're looking at this headphone, we see that we have a metal bridge on top, and we have a leatherette kind of headband, and we have these stems on the side that are about like 3 fingers tall, and they're adjustable. But so unlike the competition, the bridge and the headband move up and down together. So the distance between them never changes, regardless of how high or low we make it.
Right.
And these are click stops. There's 10 click stops, and they cover a range of 3 centimeters on either side.
So if they move together, then you would have to make sure that you click symmetrically, right?
Well, you could make one side lower than the other. They're combined.
Sure, but would that mean you'd have a lopsided head, Srajan, if that's what you're doing?
I have a lopsided head. You have never noticed.
Wasn't trying to suggest it for a moment. But
No, but all I'm saying is that on some headphones where the band moves independently from the bridge, eventually the band starts touching the bridge. You run out of space. And with this one, both of them move up and down together. I've never seen this done before, and it's actually really clever. I think it is extremely well built. We have a mixture of metal for the body, plastic for the grill, plastic for the what I call the stem. This is pleather, so it's not real leather. And the cups, I mean the pads are pleather, so some kind of synthetic leather with memory foam on the inside. Now, surprisingly, this metamaterial that they call the dragon scales, it really works. So sonically, the more expensive sealed version doesn't take, it's not left behind at all by the open back version in terms of transparency, in terms of soundstage width, and in terms of perceived detail. But there is a difference in the tuning in that on the sealed version, starting at around 700 hertz, the bass goes up, but it goes up in a straight line. There's no bumps, there's no suckouts. It's just like a teeter-totter where one side is slightly higher than the other. So the bass sits a little bit higher than the treble. And that's very much like an ideal in-room speaker response. Where if it measures flat, it sounds either lightweight in the bass or it sounds bright in the treble. If we sort of tilt it up, let's see, there we go, tilt it up. In room, we have sort of an ideal frequency response. And so the sealed version has that, and the open back version is flat. So the sealed version feels a little bit more robust, substantial, dense, and full. But importantly, the bass does not have that ringy, droning quality that a lot of sealed headphones can have. So that dragon scale metamaterial works extremely well. And now I'm just going to read off some numbers. So the sealed version is 50 ohms and 160 dB at 1 milliwatt and 390 grams. The open back is 28 ohms, so half the impedance, and 108 dB. So with the 2 dB of extra sensitivity plus half the impedance, there's quite a lot of change in terms of sensitivity. These are more sensitive than the sealed ones. The weight on these is 350, and on the sealed ones it's 390. And even though the build looks the same, the drivers are completely different. And I have a feeling that the drivers on the sealed one have bigger magnets, which accounts for the difference in weight. And they also have a much, much larger surround. They actually look like a miniature woofer with like a usual rubber surround, which is also why they seem to be more dynamic than the open back version.
Okay.
In short, it's probably my favorite dynamic headphone shy of some ridiculous price. And in-house, I would rate these the same as...
Here's one you prepared earlier.
I would rate these the same as the Final D8000, which are planers.
Which are also a lot more expensive. Like a lot more expensive. They're $3,000, aren't they?
But, made in Japan.
Yeah.
And the point that I'm going to make next is dynamic drivers are a very, very old technology, nearly about 100 years old. It's very mature. Planers are more complicated. To get planers to perform as well as dynamics, you have to spend more money.
Right.
You get more for less when you go the dynamic route because it's something that everybody has done forever. So in my mind, if you want to get better bang for the buck, don't buy planers, don't buy ribbons, don't buy electrostats, don't buy air motion transformers. Buy a good old-fashioned dynamic. You won't have to spend as much money. So in my household, these sealed Aune SR7000 would sit on the same plateau sonically, I mean performance-wise and balance-wise, as the Finale. And what I have above them would be the Susvara and the RAL ribbons, which cost up to 10 times as much. And they're super comfortable as well. And the only thing that at present I don't know is I don't know how well the plastic bits will wear over time, which would be this bit here, and it would be this bit here, like up and down and hanging them, and will they develop scratches, and will they develop sort of discoloration from skin oils? That I don't know yet.
Right. So for the benefit of the people listening, you're talking about the bits where the ear cup joins the suspension mechanism that goes over your head. It's like it's that interface that could be. Yeah, I mean, who knows over time with plastic things? It's a bit of a lottery. But then again, generally, a lot of the pleather ear pad material tends to it tends to crumble over time.
That's something I have to see. That's what happened to my Sennheiser HD800.
Right.
The pads completely crumbled. I mean, they were useless. I hated them.
Huh. Srajan, your cat is asking for a feed, I think.
Yes, she is. So
she's early. She can go away.
Yeah. This SR7000, it's the third headphone that the brand have made. They started with something called the Jasper, which were in-ears. Then came the open back dynamic, and now they have the sealed version. And I'm actually surprised how, as a brand I've never dealt with, a brand that seems to be new to the headphone side of things. They have been into digital much, much longer than that.
Yes,
but
yes.
How mature, well-balanced, and well-thought out and finished this product is. FIO, obviously, I believe, is a bigger company.
Yes.
And they have been around in the space, I think, even longer. So there I wasn't as surprised how good I thought the FIO FT3 is for also somewhere around, 300,
yeah.
euros or thereabouts. I was very surprised with these. So I think this could be a good tip for people looking, especially people that need a sealed headphone.
Right.
I'd say if you don't need the sealed one, you can spend half the money, get the open back one, and the only thing you won't have is quite the same sort of weight and dynamic shove in the bass. Otherwise, they're very, very similar.
Right.
And one other thing about Aune, the brand, is that not a single one of their SKUs, their models, exceeds 1,000 euros.
Right.
The most expensive ones sort of hover around 700, and then they have stuff below. So they're very deliberately not a sort of a royalty brand or aristocracy brand. They're very deliberately like a man of the street kind of brand, at least at this point.
Okay, well, I'm not going to talk about a man of the street product now. This is very much a high-end product for somebody who really has the money and has the wherewithal to know exactly what they're buying. This is I think it might be one of the world's most expensive streaming active loudspeakers that we've seen to date. It comes from Focal. It's called the Diva Utopia, right? And I'll get to the price at the end because I want you to listen to the whole segment. But it is for somebody with deep pockets, but also somebody who's got strong arms, right? Because each speaker weighs 64 kilos. So to put that into context, like I've just done the Golden Ear T66. They're just under 30 kilos. Just about I can lift those upstairs without kind of killing myself or risk falling over. But 64 kilos, that's a two-man lift.
Yeah, my wife weighs 55 kilos, and if I had to carry her up the stairs,
right,
I'd be working.
So so you're going to need. I would imagine they come delivered in crates on a pallet. This is a floor-standing loudspeaker, So we don't see many streaming active floor standards. I mean, I know that Audio make them, Bookart. I'm going to miss some now, but those are just off the top of my head. But this is almost a full range speaker. So it's minus 3 dB at 27 hertz.
Is this the one that has this really attractive sort of felt or cloth cover on the side?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's attractive, but I've seen plenty of people grumbling about it. Don't like that, you know. But I think...
I think it's very attractive.
I do as well, but I think it's for somebody with a progressive sense of aesthetic. So if you've got a very traditionally furnished home, you know, with lots of kind of like old woods and like, I don't know, Winchester. Is it Winchester furniture? Is that a sofa? Winchester? I don't know. Like anyway, the leather couches, you know, those kind of like intricately patterned rugs. This is not a speaker for you visually. I mean, it might be audibly. I don't know, but this is. Focal are aiming this at a probably cashed up younger folk. I don't know. But let me get into the nitty gritty on the drivers, because there's some things here, Srajan, that I don't understand, right? Now, I'm going to have a bit of a grumble, because I was sent not a proper press release, like as a Word doc or a PDF. It was a JPEG of two, I think what may have existed as two PDFs. I got this from their UK PR company. I'm not going to throw them under the bus, but it was very skinny on details. I'll get to something important about that in a moment. But it did tell us that there are 4 6.5-inch bass drivers at the bottom of the unit, right? Now they are aligned in something called, and I'm going to do air quotes here, push configuration. I don't know what that is. The press materials didn't explain it. So it's just going outwards all the time rather than kind of swinging left to right. Is that what you think?
That's my assumption.
Okay.
Somebody else would call it force cancelling.
Right. Okay. That makes more sense to me. Right, from having seen that before. And then on mid bass, it's another 6.5-inch driver, and this comes with, and here comes my air quotes again, a TMD surround and NIC or NIC motor. So. Again, I mean, there was a picture, but I get a bit agitated when I get a press release that's 5 pages long, and I've grumbled about this on here before, and I know people go, "Oh, it's your job," but like 2 pages is perfect. 5 pages is too long, but like half a page is nowhere near enough. Anyway, I'll leave people to Google for this, and then something that we do know about and we have seen from Focal before, the tweeter. It's made from beryllium and it's M-shaped. So it's kind of, well, I kind of draw it in front of the camera, but it's an M-shaped inverted dome essentially, and I think they use that in their headphones as well.
I believe so.
Yeah, but obviously being an active speaker, every driver needs its own amplifier. So for those 4 bass drivers, we get 400 watts of Class AB power, and that amp has been designed by, well, all the amps have been designed by Name's engineers, because Focal and Name are under one roof essentially. The mid-range driver gets 75 watts of Class AB amplification, as does the tweeter. So it's all Class AB. So Class D grumblers, they're going to have to find something else to grumble about. Maybe the felt and the appearance for John. This thing also does streaming. These things. So we got Bluetooth, Spotify Connect, Tidal Connect, Apple AirPlay 2 and Google Cast, but very weirdly actually no Roon Ready. Now when I see Bluetooth, Spotify Connect, Tidal Connect, Apple AirPlay 2 and Google Cast, I think that they've got their streaming board from Stream Unlimited.
In Austria.
With that, in Austria, right? Excuse me. So to have no Roon Ready is kind of weird. So I'm willing to bet, I don't know this is me guessing, so this is not in the press release. It'll come. I just think they're just waiting for it to be certified before they announce its presence. Because they could go, well, at future, it could be in the future there'll be Roon Ready, but that agitates customers because it's like, when is it coming? When is it coming? When is it coming? And as we know from Bookart or even from Hagel, it took a long time. So rather than agitate your customer base, it's best to say it's not in there at time of announcement or time of launch. But you can Roon to the Google Cast input and the Apple AirPlay 2 input, no problem. So for me, it's not a big deal breaker.
So is this like
is
this like an all DSP kind of a crossover?
Yeah, I mean, that wasn't in the press release, but I assume so. In fact, it must be, because the interlink between the two speakers can be wired or wireless, and that's over Cat5 or wireless, and it's either 2496 or 24192. So everything must be done in DSP. Has to be. I'll hold that DSP thought, though, because I'll come back to it.
Okay.
But that also means that the analog RCA on the back of the primary speaker will be digitized upon entry. Mm-hmm. Then we've also got Toslink, HDMI eARC, which I think is essential these days. And USB, but USB-A for storage devices. That's not for your computer. That's for plugging in a hard drive and whatever. We also get a Zigbee remote, which I would imagine will be kind of similar to that which we get from a Name Unity type product. Really nice remotes. Wonderful connectivity because it's not infrared or anything like that. And the price is 40,000 US dollars a pair. So this is big money, which I have something to say about this in a minute. But
wait a minute, we've got how many amplifiers in the base? 4, right?
Well, I don't know whether it's one 400 watt amp for 4 bass drivers or whether it's
a 4-channel.
It's 400 watts. We're not told.
Okay, but we've got a minimum of 3 stereo amplifiers from Name built in there.
Yes, Class AB as well. Yeah, so they need cooling.
Then we've got a DSP crossover.
Yep.
Then we've got a streamer.
Yep. Sorry, I'm pouring some water. Sorry. Right next to the microphone.
We don't need any cables to connect all of those bits and bobs because it's all inside the speaker.
Correct.
We don't need a rack and shelves and isolators and footers. So we're really not talking about a pair of speakers. We're talking about a complete system that just looks like two conventional floor standing speakers.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's a full-on high-end hi-fi system, and for me, it wins because it doesn't promote the idea that. I mean, one of the things I hate about hi-fi, and this is going to mark me out as somebody who's maybe not a team player, is that when I see a photograph, especially at shows, right, or dealers or whatever, 2 speakers, and then you've got 2 double-wide racks between them, full of gear, and there's power amps on the floor, on platforms. No, I'm a hard no on all of that. I resist that as much as I possibly can. I don't like having a lot of gear in my house on display anyway that I look at when I'm, say, listening to music or watching TV. So I think it's interesting that Focal are saying to customers, this is a one-time purchase. You don't need to worry about matching amps to passive speakers or getting the right streamer or the right DAC. I know there will be lots of people in the comments saying, but I can't choose my DAC and I can't choose my streamer, and that's half the fun for me. And that's fine, and no one is taking away your toys that allow you to do that. This is just another way for another bunch of people who are not you, right? Because this is one of audiophiles, the people who are audiophiles, one of their great failings is to see something enter the audiophile market and then assess it based upon their own needs, which I guess is a human thing to do, but not think about, well, I don't like this, but maybe there is a market for this for somebody who isn't me, who's got different tastes, different needs, different everything, right? It's about thinking outside of yourself. I think audiophiles, in the comment sections at least, I see, they're pretty shit at that. You know, it's like, this is about me, and I don't like this because I don't like this, and I can't use that, and I can't choose, and what happens when my speakers break and they all have to go off? It's me, right? And our job, Srajan, I think, is to think about who is this for? So like a range of people, and say, well, okay, if you love the system building aspect, I'm on a rant here, aren't I? If you love the system building aspect, this is not for you, and you can just cheerfully ignore it and go about your day, right? Rather than tell us again for the 100th time that you don't like it because you don't get to make any choices about what goes inside. End of rant.
Now, let me ask you a question. Because we are in unapologetic upscale land here in terms of price and perceived performance, I assume they have built in some kind of room correction software. And if so what is it?
Yeah, this is interesting because it wasn't in the original press release, right?
Oh, you got to be
I was
kidding
on the
me.
phone to another colleague who said, oh yeah, I just saw on Facebook that Focal are talking about the room compensation that's in the Diva Utopia. I'm like, what? That wasn't in the press release. So why wasn't it in the press release? Because that's a very, very important feature for many people to have room compensation. It's not Dirac. I think it's Focal's own, I think.
Well, but that's again, something to talk about then.
Right, but it's hard to know, isn't it? Because it wasn't in the bloody press release. Or at least the press release that I got.
That you got, yeah.
Right, now, I would say a couple of things about room compensation here because I think people need to be reminded of this. Room compensation software is excellent for dealing with bass modes, low frequency problems, standing waves. It can be very effective in that. But no matter how good the room compensation software, it will be zero good. It won't do anything for reverb above about 300 hertz in the mid-range of the treble, which is what I'm always crapping on about when I'm talking about, my room treatments in these spaces, right? You can't, there's no getting around that, doing that. Now, if we're all owning sort of 5K, 10K systems, well, I guess it doesn't really matter whether you've got a treated room or not, you can't live with it. But I think if you're spending $40,000 US dollars, it's £30,000, that's what I'm getting confused. If you're spending that money, you could spend 10 or 15 and treat your room wonderfully, and then spend the rest, the remaining 25 on good hardware, and you would get a better result than putting these speakers into an untreated room. Ergo, I think you need a treated room for these speakers.
Well, especially with the kind of bass response at the bass extension that they seem capable of.
Yeah,
because the average room, when we're looking at the average dimension, they tend to have standing modes, standing waves, resonances, somewhere around 35 to 40, then 70 and 80. So smack in the upper bass and smack in the mid bass.
Yeah.
And I find very little as annoying as this sort of boomy, ringy.
It's the ringing.
Bass.
Yes.
I don't care how good everything else is. If that's wrong, it just drives me out of the room. And if you're spending that kind of money and you have a speaker that is capable to excite the lowest room mode in your room, even one down at 30 hertz, if you can't correct that, sad days.
This is why most studio engineers don't spend big on speakers, because they put all the money into the room treatment, because they know they're going to get the better sound, and then the speakers it's almost immaterial to them, what speakers they have. I won't say always for every studio. I know lots of high-end studio owners have big ATCs and things like that, but a lot of them, they don't, because all the money goes into the room treatment. And I know I crap on a lot about room treatment, but it really, when you're spending 40k, you've got to be thinking about that at some point. You really should. So as I wrote in my news article about these speakers, this is a speaker for somebody who's already got a treated room, or has got a room that sounds really good, or is big enough that it doesn't have reverb problems or bass problems. But even then, if you've got a big room, you might be able to push any bass resonances out of band because it's so large, the room. But you're still going to have reverb issues if you have reflective surfaces all around. So it's such a conundrum, I think, hi-fi for a lot of people, Srajan, especially when it gets to the high end. He's like, well, I want to buy this, but really the money should go into the room. And most people, they'll readily admit this in the comment section, my wife won't let me do it, right? They'll throw the missus under the bus, which I believe them, And then you'll get somebody else coming in underneath going, well, don't you have any balls? Can't you decide for yourself? But it's not as simple as that, is it? You don't want to have an argument for the sake of getting better sound in your life. So I see this as for somebody who's got a really big house, or is building their own listening room, or just maybe some. The only reviewer who I think could do these is Livonia, because he's got the big barn. He's got a big space. He's space to do it. If I see a review of these, I want to know how big the room is. Right. And I want to have a look at the room, right? Because really, we should know that, because it's such a fundamental factor. This is why when I see high-end reviews on other websites, I'm like, but we don't see the room. So how, does that have a bearing on it? I want to know. But I guess there's a reason why we don't see it.
I think that you meant to also stress something about the relative quality of a particular press release?
Well, that was it. I mean, it was me saying that I only got like 2 JPEGs of, I think, what were PDFs. And when I tried to blow them up, they kind of all went all blurry. So I actually, for once, I had to go scratching around on other people's coverage to find bits of information about these speakers, who obviously got some proper press release, but the one I got from the UK PR company, nope, was lousy. So I don't know whether they just
to be fair, it did not come from Focal directly.
No, it did not. No.
Okay.
But it's, yeah, I mean, I want a couple of pages. Personally, if I ruled the world, all press releases would just be a bullet-pointed list of features. I'll write all the fluffy shit around it, like if I want to.
Right.
But I have to. We've discussed this before, haven't we? We have to take it all out, and then rebuild from there. Right? We have to kind of go bare bones. But the trouble is, when you get 5 pages of it, it's very hard to know what's important and what's not, or what's maybe Division 1 importance, then Division 2, and then Division 3. I don't know sometimes.
And the other thing that I need to mention, in response to you reading it and saying, Srajan, I don't know what it means, is that when companies make up their own acronyms for things that are completely ordinary, but you have no idea what they're talking about. Like, what's the CID surround, or what's an MBV cone? No idea.
Yeah.
So if you're using terms that are unusual, you must explain them. You can't just get away and call something CID whatever. Tell me what that means.
So that happens increasingly more often.
It does.
I think. I think it's a way of branding everything that you do, essentially, as a manufacturer. You don't just brand the finished product. You brand the ingredients. So then you can kind of say, well, okay, well, it's got this BRC unit from that other higher end model. We put it in here. But I think the press release, maybe instead of having the company bio, which I don't care about ever, it could say, okay, this is what these technological features mean, as you say, like it. And we can start with iFi with that, because they're the worst for that. Yeah. They really need to go do a lot of explaining. They need a press release for their press release. Anyway, okay, all right, back to you, Srajan.
If I told you that I wanted to buy a pair of monoblocks, and I did not want them to be Class D, could be Class A or could be Class AB, and I wanted really good quality, how much money do you think I would have to spend, based on what you know?
10, 20 grand for a pair.
Okay.
Maybe 15, I don't know. I mean, what are PS Audios? They're about 10 grand each, I think. Yeah, you'd have to go to China, I think, to get something cheaper.
What if I told you that I had a pair for 1,500 euros, the pair?
Monoblocks? Wow, okay, that's pretty good.
Class
they're not Class D?
Class
D?
Class AB.
Okay. Okay. That's unusual. I'm surprised. I'm intrigued.
Okay. Again, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce the name, but it's a Singxer or Singxer?
Yeah.
Sing, and then it's XER?
Yeah.
Let's call it Singxer, right?
Yeah. Singxer. Okay, so Singxer. Up to now, they've been primarily known for their digital, but they just came out with something called the SA-90, which is a 90 watt into 8 ohm, 180 watt into 4 ohm, Class AB monoblock, half size. It looks like a shoebox. It's very, very plain looking. The heat sinks are on the inside. So all you see on the outside is a faceplate with a bent sheet metal cover and some sluts on the top and on the side. However, now I'm going to have to look at my cheat sheet. They have a signal to noise ratio that is greater than 140 dBA weighted. Wow, okay.
That's an impressive number. That means better than 23-bit resolution or 2.3 microvolts of noise. That is exceptionally low self-noise from a linear, not switching power supply. The power supply has a 300 watt toroidal transformer, and let me see, 20 microfarads worth of electrolytic capacitance. And we have adjustable voltage gain at the belly, there's like a little switch that you can set from 16 dB to 23 dB. And you have another switch on the belly for ground lift. So the ground can be floating or it can be connected.
Okay.
There's no fan, so there's no self noise. There's DC coupling for all the stages except for the very first. The input has an input capacitor.
Okay.
So it's much more impervious to DC on the power line than if it was completely DC coupled.
Right.
And all the stages use bipolar junction transistors, not MOSFETs. And the output stage, its push-pull, only uses a single pair of output transistors. One for the plus, one from the minus half of the waveform. And they are 220 watt rated transistors each. Now, at 1,500 euros for that pair, I put them up against everything that I have in-house in terms of amplifiers. And what these do, because they have such a low noise floor, is that I'm sure you have heard with good Class D that it excels at particular things. So how about you tell us what Class D tends to be good at?
So for me, it usually communicates a sense of that sort of white window transparency. So like squeegee clean I think is a term that I use quite often. But it can be a little bit sort of emotionally standoffish, just a touch, and a bit cool at the top end, so that you don't feel like any sense of warmth, or that you get the rounding maybe from a Class AB amp that you might get. I'm generalizing here.
Right.
Class D might be great for detail, or the set. I don't want to say detail. The sense of detail, the sense of musical insight, sort of how far you can sort of see into the mix. And also very good for bass, because that's why Class D tend to be used on subwoofers, right? So good for bass control.
So if we're taking all the good stuff that you just mentioned about Class D, and particularly that incredible crystalline sort of clarity, and that really high contrast ratio where sounds seem to sort of pop from outer space, just nothingness, just real silence. But if with Class D we complain about that it seems to be a little mechanical, you call it standoffish, I call it overdamped, which in the bass is great. Because the bass is powerful and it stops on time. There's no ringing or overhang. But then as we ascend in the frequencies, that same sort of grip and control, to me, seems to sort of prematurely clip off the decays. It sort of just, it controls the driver too much. And a tweeter doesn't need the same kind of control that the woofer needs. That tweeter actually will sound better with a lot less control or higher output impedance. So if that's the thing that lovers of Class D still complain about, they love all of the good stuff, but they find the sound a little mechanical, a little lean, a little whitish, and especially the treble just sounds sort of blah or meh.
Can be a bit grey sometimes.
This one does not.
Right.
So in terms of the treble and the presence region, I would call it really good Class AB. In terms of detail or subjective detail, the perceived sense of resolution, and that incredible sort of pop or immediacy is very much like Class D. And Class D, I think, very often has an advantage in terms of the noise floor. They use a switching power supply that completely avoids the line frequency, the 50, 60 hertz, and its harmonics, that kind of hum that a lot of cheaper power supplies, if they're linear, will have. A lot of Class D avoids that, but then it suffers other things. For some reason, they have managed to use a linear power supply that is really ultra quiet. So it combines really good Class D attributes, and it combines good Class AB attributes sort of in one hybrid for what usually would only get you Class D. If you say to somebody monoblocks, you say 100 watts, and you say $1,500, it's got to be Class D. Well, no, you can now get a Class AB monoblock. Now I should say, because I was trying to find out how they got the noise so low and why this thing doesn't run hot. It only runs in Class A for half a watt.
Okay, so it's heavily...
So it's low bias.
Bias.
It's heavily biased in Class AB.
Yeah.
And it's only using a single pair of output devices. So it doesn't create a whole lot of heat, but that's also why it can't have more power than 90 watts into 8 or 180 into 4. It's not a 200 watt amplifier. For that, it would probably need 2 pairs of output devices. It would run hotter, it would have to be bigger, etc., etc.
The only company I can think of that offers monos in Class AB at this kind of price is Shit. They have the Vida 2, the Vida 2 now, I think.
Yeah. And just the other week, I think you covered it on your website, Quad announced the reintroduction of their 303 power amp.
It was yesterday.
And that is 1,500 euros, and it's 50 watts into 8 and 70 watts into 4 in stereo.
Yep.
And if you bridge it, you get to 140 into 8 and 170 into 4. But then you're paying 3,000, which is twice of the amps that I just described.
Yeah.
So that's why I wanted to highlight it. I think it's a really excellent sounding amplifier for a really fair price.
It does sound that way. I'd never heard of this, but I'm going to have a look at this because I do see a lot of Class D stuff get announced this kind of price point, and there's so much of it. I'm like, it's not particularly interesting. But this being Class AB for that kind of money that's a good find, Srajan. Does your cat want feeding again, Srajan? I mean,
he is just talking to me, so
okay.
I'm gonna lock him into the kitchen where he can hang out with his vet.
Okay. This is a spicy one, actually. I think this is very interesting, this product, because it is affordable. I'll say that up front. I'll tell you the price at the end, but it is achievable by most people, I think. Now, it's called the CR60, and on the face of it, it's just a CD transport. So that means there's no DAC inside. You'd need to connect your external DAC using Toslink or coax, right? But like the CD transport from Shanling that I reviewed last year, it also has a USB output, which I think is really interesting for 2 reasons. Is that you can bring in dongle DACs into the equation, right? So you have a little dongle DAC hanging off the back because they're USB only, right? As you don't get Toslink or coax on those things. But also, I know this doesn't really get talked about so much with USB anymore, but it did 10 years ago, and that was the asynchronous nature of USB, in that the DAC controls the clocking, the timing of the data. So if you've got a dongle DAC that's asynchronous, or any kind of USB DAC that's asynchronous, it will control the clocking when it's pulling the data out of the CD transport, which you don't get with Toslink and coax. Now, I'm not saying that means it's definitely going to sound better, but on paper, potentially, right? There's a potential there. And I like the idea of that. This CD transport is not a slot, which is also unusual for the price point. It's a proper slide-out tray. How robust it is, I don't know. I mean, I don't think we're going to expect like DCS levels of solidity. Right. But it is a Philips drive unit and there's a Sanyo laser. So personally, I prefer top loaders. That's me. I know a lot of people like drawers or trays. Some people can't stand slots. I wasn't a fan of slots until I reviewed that T+A all-in-one, and the loading mechanism that was fantastic. But
Shanling make a top loader already.
They've made CD players for the last 20 years, and they have that big high-end blue alien spaceship thing, right? Which I like the idea of it. I don't think it looks like 20K's worth of gear.
No, it doesn't.
Because of the blue, right? It looks a bit cheap. I'm sorry to say it. I know I've joked about this with Livornia in the past, where people come in with the grump about they need to hire an industrial designer. Well, they've got one because everything that we use is designed, like literally everything. It's just that they didn't make one that was particularly visually. I don't know. I think it's an old school design that I think Shanling have run with for many years. I'm sure the internals are great. I'm sure it sounds wonderful. But yeah. Anyway, I'm going off track. Okay, so This CR60 is powered by a second USB socket, but you can add your own 12-volt DC brick if you want to. That might improve sound quality, maybe, right? You also get an infrared, right? So I'll tell the price now. It's $260 US, right? So CD transport, 260 with USB, pretty good deal, right? But this thing has a party trick, Srajan, and I think this is very cool. Actually, I think a lot of people will be into this because there's a switch on the back, and you can turn the CR60 into a CD ripper. So you can connect it to a PC or a Mac, and you can use your software, your choice of software, I guess the drive appears as like an external CD drive, like any other sort of $30 or $40 drive would, right? So it rips to your hard drive on your computer, but it doesn't end there. Oh no, there is more, right? Because you can also have it rip automatically and losslessly to a directly attached USB storage device in the back, right? So there's a slot for USB storage. So you don't even need a computer to rip your CDs. So I'm looking at this thinking, should I buy one? I mean, I'm buying a lot of stuff, so I kind of have to keep it in check. But if it had been last year, I would own one by now. But I don't know, like I tend to do any of the ripping that I do it on my Mac anyway. But I know for many people, ripping is a complicated process. Choosing the software, getting the settings right, getting all the connectivity to talk to each other, device to talk to each other. So this thing will rip to a USB drive. You put the USB into your computer, drag it across, put it on your NAS or your Roon server or whatever, right? But it doesn't end there, because
what else?
It can also rip to Android devices via Shanling's own Edict app. Now, I've got to say, I like the idea of this, but having used the Edict app to put that other CD transport, the what's it called, the CD3, the DT3, I can't remember now. It was a royal pain in the ass to use. I mean, once I got it onto my network, it was one and done. But the interface, I'm sorry, it needs significant work, I think. So if you are planning on ripping to, say, an Android, like a DAP, maybe one of Shanling's own DAPs, you need to look at the Edict app first to make sure that you are okay with its interface and how it works. I mean, it might be fine, but yeah, be able to go out a USB out of this CD transport, or CD ripper, directly into the USB socket at the bottom of your, say, phone or DAP and rip that way is also pretty cool. So for $260, even if you don't use the Edict ripping, I think this is a great deal. I mean, for me, the only question mark that hangs over this pretty heavily for me is build quality.
But you already own a few Shanling components.
Yes, yeah, I do.
How does the build quality track on those?
Fine. I mean, that CD transport with the kind of glass oven lid that I reviewed last year, that's the CD player that I use the most. Out of all the stuff that I have, I think it's fantastic.
And that's what, like $5.99, somewhere thereabouts?
It's a bit more than that, $700 maybe, something like that. But it's got all the connectivity you could possibly want as an audio nerd. It's got I2S out. It does upsampling. There's an AirPlay streamer inside, which I use for Roon sometimes. So to me, it's just wonderful. And I will say this, right? Because when I did that video this time last year, a lot of people came into the comment section going, well, this is pointless because I can just buy a Blu-ray player for $50 and have it do all the same things. So my question is, well, does it do upsampling to DSD and high-res PCM? Does it have a USB output? Does it have I2S out? Does it have a network streamer inside? Does it have all these extra things that you conveniently brushed aside in kind of just going, well, the $50 Blu-ray player will do that for you? I mean, if you're just happy with Toslink and coax out and that is it, yeah, get your $50 Blu-ray player. That will be fine for you. But Shanling are making things that are, I guess, more refined, or refined for the audio file or audio nerd, somebody who wants the extras. And that little, is it called the, I forgot, I can't believe I can't remember what it's called, because I talk about it loads, like the CD3 or the DT3 or something like that, CDT3, I don't know, but it's half width, it's got a reasonably nice interface on the front, it's a top loader. I mean, I love that thing. So if that CR60 is comparable in terms of price, like half the price, half the build quality, I guess it would be okay. Maybe I just need to buy one just to find out. but then I have to make a video, and that's a lot of time. So
just don't tell anybody that you bought one. Then you don't have to.
Well, the thing is, it will appear in a video, and people go, "When are we getting a video about that?" And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, okay." I sort of understand people's enthusiasm for things that they see in the background, but sometimes I have to be like, "Well, next year I'm going to be like, nope, you see it, but that's the last you're going to see of it. Like, or you're not going to see any more of it because I've got to draw a line under my time commitment." So, I mean, I'll finish on this, right? I think that 260 as a sort of Amazon type purchase, I think that's low enough that you don't need me to say this is great or this is not, or here's some things to consider, because you can probably buy it from a retailer who will give you right of return, and so you can just buy it, try it for yourself, and send it back. I would understand if it was like $1,000 or $2,000, but 260, most people could probably take a punt, I think. Maybe. What do you reckon? I mean,
I think so. No, okay. Like you said, it's an Amazon style purchase.
It is.
Okay, now we're going to visit your hometown, Berlin.
Okay.
And we're going to talk about a high efficiency speaker.
Okay.
But not a big Klipsch. We're talking about a compact monitor with a 5-inch full range single driver widebander.
Okay.
And you can probably guess who the manufacturer has.
It's Voxativ, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
They call it the Hagen,
okay.
but it's now the second iteration, so it's the Hagen 2.
Okay.
It's not cheap, but it's cheaper than your Klipsch. It's 6,000 euros without a stand.
Okay.
And it does come with an optional subwoofer stand, which is called the Alberich 2. And that is a cardioid, ripole, single 10-inch woofer. But I'm just going to mention this on the side. We're going to focus on the monitor.
Mm-hmm.
So the monitor is made out of MDF, completely standard, but then it's available in real piano glass lacquer. Mm-hmm. It's either black, white, or gold. And that's included in the price. That's not an extra for the finish. It has a rear horn that apparently only has 3 internal angles before it exits as a slot underneath the driver in the front.
Mm-hmm.
And it's 88 dB efficient to 92 dB depending on frequency. And that already tells you that it's not completely linear, because otherwise we would have a single figure.
Right.
Now, the speaker is potentially good for 45 hertz in the bass, and it goes all the way up to 19 kilohertz, all off this one driver with a wizard cone.
Mm-hmm.
But here is the interesting thing. And now I'm going to ask you a very generic question, that when we buy an amplifier, aside from how much power it has, what tends to be another consideration that we wonder about relative to our speaker? A specification that we're looking for.
So one thing that has become very fashionable in the last couple of years, maybe 5 years, is damping factor.
And that's a function of?
Output impedance.
The lower the output impedance, the higher the damping factor. Which is why you have some Class D amplifiers that will have a 0.0005% output impedance. That would equal a damping factor of 1,000.
Okay.
Okay. I had 3 different amplifiers with this speaker, the Hagen 2 by Voxativ. I had one with a 0.05 ohm output impedance. I had one with a 0.5 ohm output impedance. And I had one with a 4 ohm output impedance. And guess which one sounded hands down the best?
I don't know, because I don't know where you're going to go with this. So
the last one, the last one, the one that had the output impedance of 4 ohms, which would be typical for a single-ended triode amplifier without feedback.
So not the one with the lowest that you would traditionally
the one
think
with
would
the highest.
Okay.
So
So
this
with
is
a lower damping factor.
With basically a damping factor of 1.
Okay.
If the speaker input impedance is 4 ohms and the amplifier output impedance is 4 ohms,
I see. Okay, right.
damping factor is 1. which to most people sounds like there's no damping factor at all.
Mm-hmm.
However, on a high efficiency wideband driver with a very, very light cone and a very strong motor, we're talking about a driver that has good self-damping. Now, if you put an amplifier on it that has a low output impedance, which would be an excellent thing for all other type of speakers, this high efficiency widebander will lose about an octave's worth of bass. It is so well damped that it just dies off too soon.
Right.
So not only now will the speaker only be good for about 90 hertz of bass rather than the 45 hertz that it's actually capable of, everything in the mid-range and the treble will sound completely wrong. It will sound so clipped and overdamped, and the transients will sound so crisp, overly crisp, like deep fried. And the tonality will be very white. There's no black in the color palette at all. It's really annoyingly forward, very zippy, and like transients, any kind of percussive beats, they sound like hail on a tin roof. Like, or when you put something in like hot oil, that sort of
but it's a bit like an overexposed photograph.
Completely.
Right, so you push it towards the white, so all the highlights get blown out.
Yeah.
Or a video file, and so there's almost no black left.
It's exactly like that.
So does this suggest then that there is such a thing as an overdamped speaker amp combo?
Absolutely.
Right.
And this is particularly so with the so-called widebanders, like a Louder, a Resum, a Voxativ, a Cube Audio, an AER. The only exception is Zoo. Now, Zoo also make a widebander. It's just big. It's 10.3 inches, right? It has a wither cone in the middle, like a Louder. It's high efficiency, about 100 dB. But unlike all the others, the Zoo will do really well with a 200 watt Class D amplifier, as well as it will do with a 5 watt triode amplifier. It's the only exception.
Right.
But all the other ones, if you put a Class D amplifier on them that has very low output impedance, they will sound like shit. Which is why traditionally widebanders and people that love them are into low power triode amplifiers because they have high output impedance. 4 or 8 ohms is very normal for a 300B amplifier. Now you put that amplifier on a 3 or 4 way speaker, even on a Klipsch that has a 12-inch woofer.
Yeah.
And that 12-inch woofer will send back a lot of electromotive force back at the amplifier. And if that amplifier doesn't have low output impedance, then you have no control over the woofer. It will sound soggy and loose and boomy, and it may not even go as low as it's capable of. So the only proviso about the speaker is that you want an amplifier that has high output impedance.
Okay.
Which traditionally would be a single-ended tube amplifier, but it could also be a single-ended transistor amplifier, like the first watt SIT4, which I just reviewed. That was an absolutely magical combination. But with my other amplifiers, it was not.
Yeah, I don't work in this world so often, so I never kind of get to experience this level of esotericness.
Yes.
But I don't. I mean, I don't do tubes or kind of single-ended amps very often. I mean, I've got that pass amp that you sent me, which is next off the shelf when I get back to Berlin. Now I've done the Class A musical fidelity. So that's something worth trying, and probably with the Zoos as well, now that it's cold in Berlin and not hot. So, But I generally don't go near this kind of stuff, you know.
But that's exactly
interesting.
That's why I'm throwing it in here, just as sort of as a counterpoint to your more maybe mainstream choices, just to give our audience sort of like a good mix of things.
Yeah, I mean, because Hagel they did a while back, made a big noise about the damping factor of their big integrateds, you know, like it's got this damping factor, which I'm sure is wonderful if you're driving an 85 dB two-way stand mount. You know, you want good control over the bass driver. You don't want it kind of being loose or flabby or whatever, or perceived that way anyway. But I'm not so sure that always translates. Like, yeah, it's good in theory, but it probably might not translate to every speaker And I guess here is a great example of where it wouldn't.
Yeah.
And they are available direct from Voxativ or just through dealers?
Voxativ has dealers, but I assume that people that call in from somewhere where there is no dealers, there might be direct sales. That I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, cool. I think that about wraps it up then, Srajan. Short and sweet. Marvelous. I think I'm going to have a coffee now.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Talk to you next month.
All right.